At the elegant dinner table aboard a Caribbean cruise ship, I raised my glass to toast with my son and his beautiful fiancée. The orchestra played softly, laughter echoed around us, and everything seemed perfect until a young waitress slipped a folded napkin beneath my menu. In hurried blue ink, the words changed my world. I just saw her put something into your drink. My blood froze. I glanced toward the dance floor where my daughter-in-law-to-be was smiling, her sequined dress catching the light like stars. She had just poisoned me, or at least she thought she had. I switched our glasses, lifted mine to my lips, and waited for the truth to reveal itself. It had all started months earlier, long before that night of revelation. When my son Elliot called one quiet Tuesday evening, his voice held a spark I hadn't heard in years. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special," he said, excitement threading through every word. As a widow of 5 years, my world had grown small. Quiet mornings, volunteering at the library dinners, eaten alone. The thought of seeing Elliot happy again filled me with warmth. He'd been consumed by his tech company for years, and we'd grown distant. Maybe this woman had brought back the light I used to see in him. Saturday night, I dressed carefully. Nothing extravagant, just enough to look elegant. The restaurant he chose whispered wealth white tablecloths, waiters gliding like ghosts, and chandeliers that caught the light like frozen rain. When Elliot arrived hand in hand with a stunning blonde, I understood his distraction. Ava was radiant with perfect hair and a polished charm that seemed effortless. "Mrs. Bennet, I've heard so much about you," she said, her smile warm, her voice melodic. I liked her immediately, or maybe I just wanted to. Throughout dinner, Ava was flawless. She laughed at my stories, admired my earrings, and asked about my volunteer work with genuine curiosity. When I spoke of my late husband, Richard, she reached across the table to squeeze my hand with sympathy. "You shouldn't be alone so much, Rose," she said softly. "You're too lovely for loneliness." Then, as if struck by inspiration, she turned to my son. "Elliot, didn't you mention that cruise to the Caribbean, Rose, should come with us? It'll be the perfect family trip." Before Elliot could object, I found myself nodding, almost giddy at being included. Someone wanted me there, me not out of obligation, but out of choice. It had been years since anyone had said they wanted to spend time with me. I mistook her warmth for affection, not manipulation. That dinner marked the beginning of what I thought was a genuine friendship between two women bound by love for the same man. In reality, it was the opening act of a slow, calculated betrayal. Over the next few weeks, Ava became the daughter I never had. We went shopping together, had long lunches, and shared coffee dates where she listened as I reminisced about Richard's jokes and Elliot's childhood. She seemed genuinely interested, laughing at the right moments, offering soft words when my voice faltered. When she visited my home for the first time, her eyes widened with admiration. "This place is like something from a magazine," she said, touching the marble counters, admiring Richard's old study. "It's perfect. Someone could live here forever and never need to leave." Her tone was dreamy, but something in the way she said "never need to leave" left me uneasy, though I brushed it off as enthusiasm. One afternoon, I made what I now realize was a grave mistake. At a department store, I asked her to watch my purse while I went to the restroom. She agreed with a smile, trying on sunglasses as I walked away. When I returned, everything looked untouched. My wallet, my keys, even my pill organizer, all there. But later, I'd understand that was the moment she first slipped poison into my life, literally. The changes came gradually. A misplaced memory here, a moment of disorientation there. I'd wake up in rooms I didn't remember entering. Forget names of neighbors I'd known for decades. Once I got lost driving home from the grocery store. I told myself it was stress or age catching up to me. But every time it happened, Ava was there within hours with soup cookies or tea laced with sweetness, and as I'd later discover, something else. "Don't worry, Rose," she'd say soothingly. "Everyone forgets things sometimes. You're just tired." When I told Elliot about the episodes, he brushed it off. "You're fine, Mom. Maybe you just need a break. The cruise will help." Ava's voice chimed in from the background. "Sea air is magic," she said. "You'll feel like a new person." I laughed then, believing her kindness. I didn't realize she was already destroying me sip by sip. The night before the cruise, she insisted on helping me pack. "You won't need much," she said, folding my clothes with practiced precision. "I'll take care of everything." Her tone was affectionate, but when I looked away, I could feel her eyes sweeping over my belongings, my medications, my jewelry, the old house keys that hung from a ribbon. Every part of me she was cataloging, preparing. When the ship set sail, I felt almost giddy again. The ocean shimmered under the sun, and for the first time in months, my head felt clear. Elliot was smiling. Ava was radiant. It felt like a new beginning, but that feeling didn't last long. By the second day, I began to lose time again. I'd wake up in strange places on the ship, once at 3:00 a.m., barefoot on deck, the ocean stretching endlessly around me. The next morning, Ava brought me orange juice and pills. "Don't forget your medication," she reminded gently. I drank it without question. That night, I overheard them arguing in their cabin next door. Elliot's voice was tense. "This wasn't part of the plan," he said. Ava's reply was sharper, colder. "Plans change. We don't have a choice now." I froze, listening to the sound of papers rustling, whispered urgency, and my son's voice cracking with unease. My stomach twisted with dread. I wanted to believe I'd misheard, that the woman I'd welcomed into my heart wasn't capable of harm. But something deep inside me already knew the truth. When formal night arrived, the ship's dining room glowed like a palace of glass and gold. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, while a live band played soft jazz that wrapped every table in a veil of intimacy. Ava shimmered in a gold sequin dress, her hair swept into a perfect twist. Elliot seemed more relaxed than he had all week, even laughing at her stories. For a moment, I wondered if I'd been wrong all along, if my fears were nothing but the paranoia of an aging widow. Then the waitress appeared. She was young, her brown eyes serious, and she moved with the careful composure of someone who knew how to keep a secret. "Here's the special dessert menu you requested, ma'am," she said softly. I hadn't requested anything. Confused, I opened the leather-bound menu and found a folded napkin tucked inside. My name was written on it in hasty blue ink. "I just saw her put something into your drink. Small white powder from a tiny bottle in her purse. Don't react. Switch glasses when she comes back." The room seemed to tilt. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked toward the dance floor, where Ava spun gracefully in Elliot's arms, laughing under the warm lights. She looked like the perfect future daughter-in-law, but the note in my trembling hand told a different story. Without hesitating, I reached for the 2 glasses of red wine on the table. Identical crystal goblets filled with deep burgundy. One was half empty mine. The other barely touched hers. In one smooth motion, I switched them. They returned moments later, breathless and smiling. "That was wonderful," Ava said, settling into her seat and lifting the glass that had been mine. "To family," she toasted. Elliot echoed her words. I raised my own glass, forcing my hand to stay steady, and whispered, "To family indeed." Inside, my stomach churned with dread and grim anticipation. 20 minutes later, I watched her poison herself. It started subtly, a flicker of her eyelids, a delicate hand brushing her forehead. "The dining room feels warm," she murmured. Elliot frowned. "Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine," she said, but her voice had slowed, her pupils beginning to dilate. 10 minutes later, her words slurred as she stared at the chandelier. "The lights are sparkly tonight, like little diamonds dancing." Have you ever seen diamonds dance rose? Elliot's fork clattered onto his plate. Ava, you've hardly had anything to drink. Are you sure you're okay? She tried to stand but swayed dangerously, catching herself on the back of her chair. I feel floaty. Like I'm on a cloud, she said, her words spilling together. Maybe you should sit down, I suggested gently, hiding the tremor in my voice. Then she looked at me, her beautiful face slack with confusion. Rose, did you know the ocean has secrets? Her voice rose into a babble of nonsense, fragments of phrases and disjointed images tumbling out of her mouth. Other diners began whispering and pointing. Elliot's face flushed with embarrassment and worry. Okay, that's enough. Come on, Ava. Let's get you back to the room. But she resisted, muttering about big secrets and keeping things safe. Even drugged and incoherent, she was almost confessing. As Elliot guided her toward the elevator, she rambled on about floating castles and golden fish, the same kind of confused, disconnected speech I'd been experiencing for weeks. The difference was that she had done this to herself. For the first time, I knew beyond doubt that I had been poisoned, not aging, that I had been living with a predator. When they disappeared, I found the waitress. She was clearing tables, her movements efficient, but her eyes still sharp. Thank you, I whispered, my voice thick. I've been watching her for 2 days, she replied quietly. She's been doing something to your drinks every time you left the table. I've seen this before. Will you help me prove it? I asked. She nodded. Security has cameras everywhere. We can check the footage. The security office was a cramped room of monitors and quiet professionals. The ship's security chief, a serious man in his 50s, pulled up the recordings. We watched Ava excuse herself from the table, stop at the bar, order 2 glasses of wine. When the bartender turned away, she glanced around, pulled a tiny glass vial from her purse, and tapped white powder into 1 glass with practiced efficiency. She stirred it quickly, with a cocktail straw disposed of the vial, and returned to the table with a bright smile. The one on the left was yours, the waitress confirmed. I stared at the screen, watching myself smile at Ava, completely unaware I was about to drink poison. How long has this been happening? The security chief asked. Months, I whispered. I thought it was age, maybe dementia. But now, we need to document everything, he said firmly. This is attempted poisoning, possibly attempted murder. He began making calls to the captain, to law enforcement at our next port. Within minutes, a plan was forming. They would search the cabin for evidence, vials, tampered medication, anything to prove the pattern. But as the security chief spoke, a deeper dread crept through me. I needed to know if my son had been part of this. Was he another victim, or had he been helping her destroy me? At 11:00 p.m., they knocked on Elliot's cabin door. I stood behind the security team, my heart pounding as my son opened the door in pajama pants and a t-shirt, his face a mixture of confusion and fear. Mom, what's going on? He asked, but I couldn't answer. I just stared at him, searching for guilt, for truth. Inside, Ava lay on the bed, still groggy from the drug she'd swallowed herself. She blinked slowly as officers entered, her mouth opening and closing without sound. This is insane, Elliot said, his voice rising. Ava would never hurt anyone, especially not my mother. But the evidence spoke louder than his words. In her suitcase, hidden beneath folded lingerie, they found 3 small glass vials with their labels peeled away, a prescription bottle matching my blood pressure medication, but filled with counterfeit pills, and her tablet filled with secret videos of me stumbling, confused, disoriented. Each clip was a brick in the case she'd been building to have me declared incompetent. Watching them felt like dying. Elliot stared at the evidence, his face draining of color. Ava, what is this? What have you done? She tried to focus on him, slurred something incoherent, then fell silent. The security chief turned to me. She's been creating a legal case to take control of your assets. We'll need to test everything, but this is clear attempted fraud and possibly attempted murder. I looked at my son, his hands trembling as he held the edge of the bed. Did you know? I asked. His eyes filled with tears. Mom, I swear on Dad's grave. I had no idea. I thought you were just getting older. I thought she was helping you. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe I still had a son who loved me, that this woman hadn't poisoned everything between us. But trust once cracked doesn't heal overnight. By morning, the cruise ship had docked in Miami and uniformed officers were already on board. The atmosphere was heavy with quiet tension. Ava was no longer the graceful woman who'd charmed me with her smile. She was pale, hollow-eyed, and silent as they led her away in handcuffs. My son stood beside me, still trying to process what his life had become overnight. There has to be some mistake, he whispered again, but his voice lacked conviction. Detective Maria Santos introduced herself in a calm, steady tone that didn't invite argument. She was in her 40s, composed, sharp-eyed, and clearly used to dealing with tragedies like this. We ran her prints, Mrs. Bennett, she said, opening a file filled with papers and photos. Her real name isn't Ava Mitchell. It's Ava Richardson. She has a criminal record: fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. She's done this before. The room spun slightly. I gripped the edge of the table to stay grounded. Before the detective nodded gravely. We've linked her to at least 3 other victims. A contractor named Robert Hughes, 62 years old, died under suspicious circumstances 8 months ago. His family reported that he'd been acting confused and forgetful before his death. His wife, Ava Richardson, inherited nearly $500,000. I felt Elliot tense beside me. Detective Santos continued sliding another photo forward. She also had an uncle, Edward Richardson, who was committed to a psychiatric facility 3 years ago for sudden onset dementia. Ava was his caretaker before the commitment and gained full power of attorney. Once he was moved to another facility and taken off the medications she'd provided, his condition improved dramatically. The pattern was horrifyingly clear. She poisons people slowly, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Makes them seem incompetent, takes control, and then finishes the job. The detective nodded. You're lucky you caught her when you did. Another few months, and your symptoms could have been irreversible. You might never have recovered enough to tell anyone. Elliot sank into a chair, his face gray. If she could do that to you, Mom. What was she planning for me? Detective Santos didn't hesitate. Based on her history, you were next. After she had your mother declared incompetent, or worse, she would have married you, consolidated your assets, and waited for another accident. She's methodical and patient. She's perfected this cycle for years. It was a grotesque masterpiece of manipulation. She'd studied me, learned my weaknesses, the loneliness, the yearning for family, the guilt of getting older, and turned them into weapons. She turned Elliot's protective instincts into complicity, feeding his worry, shaping his perception until he saw me as fragile and unreliable. I'll need to stay on board to oversee evidence transfer, Detective Santos said, rising from her seat. The vials, the altered pills, the videos, they all form a strong case. She'll face multiple charges: attempted murder, fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft. Minimum 25 years if convicted. When Ava was escorted past us, her wrists bound, she turned her head and met my eyes. The faintest smile touched her lips, something between pity and arrogance. I really did care about you, Rose, she said softly. You have to believe that. I said nothing. There are no words for that kind of betrayal. At the hospital later that day, the toxicologist confirmed everything. She's been giving you a cocktail of medications. Small doses that build up over time, Dr. Williams explained gently. Enough to cause confusion and memory loss without immediate detection. You're lucky, Mrs. Bennett. A few more months, and we'd be dealing with permanent cognitive damage. I nodded numbly, unable to feel the relief I should have felt. Elliot stayed by my side through every test and interview. I could see the torment in his face, the guilt of not protecting me, the shame of having loved the woman who tried to kill me. I keep replaying everything he said one night, sitting in the hospital chair, while city lights flickered beyond the window. How she always wanted to handle your prescriptions. How she asked about your will. I thought she was just being helpful. His voice cracked. I should have seen it. You couldn't have. I told him softly. She was good at what she did. Evil but good. He shook his head. She even told me we should get you evaluated for dementia, just to help you early. I thought she was being responsible. I reached for his hand, the same hand I'd held when he was a little boy. She fooled us both, Elliot. But she can't fool anyone anymore. In the weeks that followed, the investigation uncovered more than we imagined. Ava had studied us long before Elliot ever brought her to dinner. She'd read articles about my charity work, traced property records, even visited the library where I volunteered. She'd built a profile widowed, wealthy, isolated, and yearning for family. I was her perfect target, and she'd nearly succeeded. When the trial began months later, I chose not to attend every session. Seeing her face so calm and poised behind the defense table made me feel sick. She pleaded guilty to avoid a harsher sentence, 25 years with no chance of early parole. Her uncle was relocated to a proper care facility, already regaining his independence. And the death of Robert Hughes, her previous husband, was reopened for investigation. Elliot moved back into my home during my recovery. He converted Richard's old study into a workspace and began working fewer hours. We had dinners together every night, rediscovering a rhythm we'd both forgotten. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, he looked at me and said, "I almost lost you. I'm never letting that happen again." It took months, but life slowly returned to peace. The fog that had clouded my mind lifted completely. I could read again without forgetting sentences, cook without burning food, drive without losing my way. Each small act of normalcy felt like a victory. I thought often of the waitress, the stranger who had saved my life by trusting her instincts. She refused any reward, saying, "Just pay it forward." Notice people the way I noticed you. I have ever since. I notice everything now. The kindness in a stranger's eyes, the tone behind someone's words, the difference between care and control. The woman who tried to steal my life ended up giving me something unexpected: clarity. I learned that real strength isn't in wealth or power. It's in seeing the truth even when it hurts. It's in surviving deceit without letting it make you bitter. Ava wanted to live in my house forever, surrounded by the luxury she hadn't earned. Now she does have a permanent home, one with steel bars, narrow windows, and locked doors. And every night I imagine her lying awake, remembering the moment I switched those glasses and took back my life. If you've ever trusted someone who wasn't what they seemed, tell me in the comments below. Your story might help someone else see the warning signs before it's too late. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that reveal the power of truth, courage, and survival.